I see Perry, and he's just saying he doesn't have anything to add right now, that he's really appreciating it's a fascinating medical challenge, and he is very much looking forward to taking samples, kind of like blood samples or something, from Luce, as he has from Asha, and he hopes to solve this issue of how to euthanize people who are the drugs don't work on.
That's true.
And that he's fascinated by that challenge, and he just doesn't have anything to add, and it feels like we get a thumbs up from that big loving presence. That
feels true.
That's fine. So now all eyes kind of turn to you, Pan. Whoa.
Whoa, Pan.
Okay, I'm Pan now.
Yes.
Whoa. I'm Sam again, just kind of speaking. You know how in Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step programs, they stand up and say something like, I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And you know how Pan is a really funny guy.
Yeah.
When Pan is feeling himself, he just jokes all the time. It's one joke right after the other. He never stops joking.
That's true.
And so Pan is standing up, and he's putting on like an alcoholic costume and saying, I'm an alcoholic.
Yes,
but he's
true.
just a reference to the 12-step programs, and he's saying that it's been really inspiring to listen to all of us today, and he knows that he's bringing up the rear of this inner circle in terms of being open about his own biggest challenge.
That's true.
And that he's afraid to say it. And he says, like Asha, he had chosen an incarnation, a non-physical incarnation, that was quite obviously not an accepted occupation.
That's true.
The nature realms are viewed as the other side, people to have treaties with.
That's true.
And he chose that to be a leader in the nature realms.
That's
and
true.
then to work with us. He says he's looking around and he's being funny again, that he can't help but notice there's no other horses or mountains, and he's using a long string of nature realms experiences around.
It's like Native American guiding the white men.
It's actually more like an African guiding them to Dr. Livingstone in Africa.
Yes.
Because he says there's a much stronger prejudice against nature realms than there is against Native Americans. And that he has been called really ugly things.
That's true.
And that as a result, he has some issues to work through.
Yes, that's true.
He's a lot of anger issues, a lot of rage, and a lot of intention to hurt. The power structure, but more like the society that has hurt him and his friends so deeply.
That's true.
And that he knows that's got to be a part of what's tripping him up. But he says he's really, like, he can smell that the answer is down that road.
Yes, that's true.
But he is putting his hands up and saying, but, I'm going to need some help to put the right words to it. And Paul is saying, oh, don't you worry, I'll get to you.
That's true. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. My perception, this is Sam here, my perception is, here's what Paul means by that.
Yes.
That Paul, as the observer, an excellent observer of people that he actually is, and that any good trial attorney is.
Yes, that's true.
But Paul thinks he knows what's up with Pan.
Well, that's true.
And he's just saying to Pan, if you will stick around and you have to get truth to truth, buddy. And to do that, just for 2, 3, 4, 5 days.
That's true.
While I'm working through this with Luce, that'll prep you so that when we get to your assignment, it can go quickly. But he said, Paul still is going on, and Paul is saying, you've got the same issue as Luce, because you can, right now, go truth to truth with that vining thing that you do.
That's true.
And you aren't doing it, and therefore it's revealed as resistance.
That's true.
But we have seen that that was Luce's pattern as well. And now by actually getting to what's actually going on for Luce, he is releasing this resistance, and it looks like bats and cockroaches and other undesirable things viewed as undesirable flying out the top of Luce's head as he's just talking through this questionnaire that I give him so that I can file a lawsuit on his behalf.
That's true.
So Pan, if you just consider, now Paul is talking, Pan, if you just consider that I'm getting ready to file a lawsuit on your behalf, start to get ready, start to think about it. And here we go, my friend. And now Paul has the microphone again, and he's saying that his working theory is that when it comes right down to it, he's going to be filing lawsuits on all our behalves, one way or another. And that may or may not be true, he says, and he could be totally wrong, but he can see the lawsuit for Pan as well as he can see it for Luce, as well as he saw it for Asha.
That's true.
And he says, Glenn is a bigger mystery, and Sam is clear, but it might not be a high priority item because it's such a rare disorder.
That's true.
But we could go for all genetic disorder. Like he's saying, there's lots of ways to approach it. However,
right, that's true.
Pan is next in line after Luce.
Yes.
From his perspective, because he can see, he can taste,
right,
smell
right
the loss.
there,
It's
feel
right
it right
there.
there.
Let's
That's
do
true.
that.
I perceive that too.
Yeah. My story is now we get a hard thumbs up
Yep.
from that loving presence. Let's just ask the loving presence before we end. Is there anything that you would like to say or that we have missed? It's a really deep, rumbly voice. It just sounds like thunder.
Or
Let's
like big
turn
rocks rolling.
Yeah, turn the dial so we can understand it. This big presence is just talking about nested presences, the higher souls of the higher souls of the higher souls of the higher souls of the higher souls, and how through our work we will need to go right through those nested presences. There isn't any way up other than through our own individual higher souls, but
That's
also
true.
through the merged higher soul of the oneness, and that the closer we get to where this big presence is, the more our paths converge.
That's true.
And that we have begun to see or feel, experience. We have begun to experience the convergence.
It's true.
And that's how we'll know when we're there, actually, is that we can feel all of our complaints, quote unquote, and he's talking about the lawsuits, are in fact the same.
That's true.
And he's saying something about this being what in fact is one of the main benefits of the legal process that we find ourselves involved in. When we can get to, and Paul is loving this. Paul is listening, going, oh my God, it's like the secret to the universe just got dropped in Paul's lap.
Yeah.
He's listening to this big loving presence saying, when you see and have filed the big class action lawsuit that covers all of these situations, bing, then
That's
we're
true.
there. And Perry, the big guy is talking to Perry, and Perry, that's when you'll be able to solve this euthanasia problem.
Riddle.
That's right.
That's true.
And so for Perry to take the blood samples from Luce after Paul is finished with Luce.
Yes.
And for and not just blood samples.
Right, all the
substance samples.
That's true.
And for Perry to take the substance samples from Pan after Paul is finished with Pan.
That's
and
true.
then after Paul goes on to whoever's next, that Perry takes the substance samples after the questionnaire is completed, because the questionnaire brings it up to the surface.
Yes, that's true.
And this big loving presence confirms that Asha is not to get out of bed. She's not to do anything.
No.
She needs to recover. And that she was convalescing before and got out of bed too soon. And now we have this much longer convalescent
That's true.
process. And it's extremely essential that she not get out of bed and not do anything for a long time.
That's true.
And to just rest and follow doctor's orders.
That feels like a thumbs up.
It feels like a thumbs up. I see Luce and Paul going back into Paul's office.
That's
They're
true.
just working.